All right, hi everyone. Welcome back into another episode of Matt Sports Talk. And in this video, we are going to be looking at all of the teams in terms of all 20 conferences, how many teams get in via an automatic bid, and we're also going to talk about teams that could potentially steal bids in this year's national tournament. And of course, last year we had 3 teams that did that, and that was Lords, Sterling, and the University of Northwest Ohio. I blanked out a little bit on Uno there, but those were the 3 teams. So we are going to talk. We're first going to go over all of the teams that have already clinched bids or not clinched bids, but we're going to talk about how many teams get bids into a national tournament. And for reference, let me go back to my iPad real quick and pull up the automatic, or not the automatic. Pull up. Just give me a second here. I'm going to pull up the conference tournaments for teams that have already clinched at-large bids. Okay, there we go. So without further ado, let's dive into that. And before we do, please take the time to subscribe to my channel down below so you do not miss out on any of this important information moving forward, because this is the place to be over the next month as we are in the heart of the postseason with all the league tournaments going on, national tournaments right around the corner. So please make sure that you subscribe down below so you do not miss out on any of this important information. And for those of you that are already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much for joining. So I really appreciate that. And please keep doing so. And again, my goal is to hit 500 subscribers by the end of this year. So please, let's get that subscriber count up and let's meet that goal. So what we're going to talk about first is the teams in each conference how many teams get in. So the first one we're going to be looking at is the AMC, that's the American Midwest Conference. And they get 2 teams in, because if you are a conference that has 10 or more teams, you receive 2 auto bids. If you play in a conference to where you have less than 10 teams, you only get 1 automatic bid. So that's how it breaks down. There's 20 conferences across the country. There are 35 teams that get automatic bids, and there are 29 that get at-larges. And again, there are 64 teams that make the national tournament, so obviously you do the math. 35 of the 64 get in via an auto bid, and the other 29 that are selected get in for an at-large bid. So how is at-large bid selected? Well, let's talk about that. If you get in via an at-large, that means that the selection show committee looks at your winning percentage. In other words, how many games did you win this year? And again, the higher the winning percentage, the more important that is. And then they look at your RPI rating, which is your rating percentage index. In other words, when they look at your RPI, they look at, okay, who did you play over the course of the year? And obviously, they also look at your strength of schedule. And again, your strength of schedule number does also affect your RPI rating. So you'll have your RPI ranking. And again, I've talked about this before, but I'll briefly mention this again, that when you look at the RPI, when you go to, and again, this is just kind of a brief overview, so to speak, of how the national tournament teams are selected, how many conferences get how many teams in, and how the at-large bids are selected. And again, of course, I learned this from watching other people, and last night my brother actually helped me out with this, going over, doing some research, because he was curious himself, just, how many teams got in each conference. And then, of course, he wrote everything down on a sheet of paper. And so it wasn't just me that was curious about all of this, which again, I know I'm the one that talks about all of this with Matt Sports Talk. But my brother was also curious how everything was done. So with that being said, that is what I wanted to share with you today. So in terms of an at-large bid, again, I mentioned your RPI, I mentioned your strength of schedule, but the committee also looks at your opponent's winning percentage. Now, last year they did your opponent's winning percentage, which that just did not make any sense, and I'm definitely thankful that that's not part of the criteria, because that could honestly get very, very confusing for a lot of people. So the committee looks at your opponent's winning percentage, and that basically tells the committee, okay, well, who did this team play over the course of the year, and then on the flip side of that, who did their opponents play? How did they do over the course of the season? So again, the higher winning percentage that you have in terms of your opponents, the better chance you have of getting in via an at-large into the national tournament. Now, obviously, not every single team that's really good or has done really well this year, not all those teams make the national tournament, especially if they didn't play anybody, if they did not play a really tough non-conference schedule, or there were teams that took bids away, and I'll dive more into that coming up here in a few minutes. And if I have to make a part 2 video talking about that, I definitely will. But that is some pieces of the criteria that go into an at-large bid. We talk about the winning percentage. And again, and of course, I learned this from watching other people, and that's why I'm able to share that information with you. That you want to have as many wins as you can. That is the most important thing. Now, if you don't get to, you want to have at least 20 wins at the absolute minimum. Now, obviously, you don't want to go for the minimum. You obviously want to go for more wins than just the minimum. However, obviously, if you don't have a really good regular season, if, for example, just like Indiana Wesleyan, they're currently sitting 17-12 right now. And now if they want to get to close to a 20-win season, they're going to have to run the last 2 games of a league tournament against Marion tomorrow night and then against either St. Francis or Bethel coming up on Monday night. That would obviously really help them. Now, again, even if they get to 19 wins, well, of course, if they get to 19 wins, they would get the second automatic bid out of the Crossroads anyway, because then at that point they would be the Crossroads League Tournament champions. So they would not be dependent on any of this other stuff in order to make the national tournament. But in case they don't win the next 2 games, this is, again, breaking down all of this, again, is going to be very, very helpful to understand how all that plays out. So obviously, you want to get to do as many wins as you can. Now, you obviously want to have as few losses as possible. Now, of course, I know Indiana Wesleyan has 12 losses right now, because if you lose more than 10 games, that just doesn't look really good to the committee, and really just isn't what you would want to see happen if you lose more than 10 games in the season. Now, again, I have seen in years past teams that have lost more than 10 games still make the national tournament. So again, that's not out of the realm of possibility for the Wildcats, but it definitely is not a position that you want to be in. That's for sure. So that's how that breaks down in terms of your wins. I mentioned the RPI. Then you have your net efficiency, which basically the committee looks at your season and they say, okay, well, what did this team do offensively? Did they score the ball? Did they score a lot every time they had a possession? That sort of thing. How are they on defense? In other words, for your net defense, efficiency. In other words, how many points did you give up per game? How many, did you get a lot of rebounds? Did you get a lot of assists? Did you get a lot of steals or blocks? That sort of thing. That's how that breaks down. And then you get to your ARC rankings, which basically is it's basically a humongous conference, merged into one. That is what the ARC is, and not just that, but if you play teams in your ARC, and again, they put, if you are in a 16-team ARC like Indiana Wesleyan is out of the Crossroads League, then you have a 16-team ARC which merges other conferences. Which in the North ARC you have the CCAC, you also have the River States, you also have the WAC. And then, of course, and I mentioned the Crossroads also in there. So you want to be as high up in your ARC as possible. And again, but I've also seen teams make the national tournament that are at the very bottom of their ARC. But the higher up you are in your ARC, the better likelihood you have of making the national tournament via an at-large bid. Now, on the flip side of that you want to play teams in your ARC, and even if you lose those games, playing teams in your ARC and also outside of your conference, that also helps your ARC ranking, because you played teams outside of your conference in that particular ARC. So again, that really helps you. Then you get to, and then of course, then you have your strength of schedule, which again, strength of schedule basically means how tough of a non-conference did you play. How competitive is your own respective conference? All that goes into your strength of schedule. And again, the higher strength of schedule number you have, the better chance you have of making the national tournament even as an at-large bid. Like for Indiana Wesleyan, they are currently sitting in the top 10 in strength of schedule. So basically, in non-conference, they played Bethel, Tennessee, they played Campbellsville, they played Indiana Tech, and all of, and again, those teams they played in that non-conference schedule, that has really helped their strength of schedule. But also playing teams in their own league, in the Crossroads League, with playing Huntington, Spring Arbor, in terms of bubble teams, Bethel, Marion, St. Francis. All of that also helps Indiana Wesleyan strength of schedule. So that's how all that breaks down. And then there are other pieces of criteria. The secondary pieces, of course, you have your conference record versus the top 50 in the RPI. If they just base that off the regular season, for IWU, that would be 4-6 against the top 50 against the conference opponents within the top 50 in the RPI. And then, of course, they also look at common opponents. They also look at head-to-head results against everybody else in the league, which for a lot of Indiana Wesleyan, not great, but not super terrible in that category. Now, another bright spot for them is additional information considered, home and away, neutral records, which is not bad. 8-4 at home, 8-6 now away, 1-2 at neutral sites. And then also, to go along with that, you also have them that they are, I believe, in terms of, what was I missing? You had your home. Oh yeah, that's right. You had your. I mentioned your home, away, neutral site records, and you also have your record in your last 10 games. They're still 7-3 in their last 10 games after the upset win over Huntington in the opening round of the league tournament Tuesday night. So again, I'm just using Indiana Wesleyan as an example. Again, really, really good numbers there. So that is how everything is broken down for how teams get an at-large bid. Of course, they also, I forgot the quad records as well. You want to have as many quad 1 wins as you can, because those, you get the most amount of points for that, particularly if you went against a quad 1 team on the road, which, for example, the Wildcats upsetting Huntington on the road, that was a quad 1 game. So again, you get a lot of points for that. And of course, if you win quad 3, quad 4 games, you do get rewarded a little bit for that, but not too terribly much. But you don't want to solely rely on quad 1 games to get you in the national tournament. You also want quad 2 games, which right now the Wildcats, as of the last update, 2-1 in quad 2. More than likely, by my math, they are currently 7-10 in quad 1 after the win against Huntington in the opening round. So again, 7-10 in quad 1, that's 17 quad 1 games, which again is really good. But at the same time, you don't want to have that many games, because you also want to have more quad 2 games, because there's going to be other bubble teams ahead of you that have played 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 quad 2 games. So therefore, those teams that do have those records are going to be ahead of you at least a little bit in terms of an at-large. So again, that's how all the at-large team selection is broken down. So we're now going to get to the conference tournaments, not who's clinched, but how all that's done. And then in part 2, we are going to talk about teams that could steal bids based on what we've seen this year, and how that breaks down, in case you do not understand what that means or do not know how all that could be done by teams taking bids away from bubble teams across the country. So we'll start first in the AMC, the American Midwest. They get 2 auto bids. It's the regular season champ, which is Columbia out of Missouri, so they get the first automatic bid. The second automatic bid is the conference tournament champion. So in other words, if Columbia also wins the conference tournament, then whoever makes the conference tournament championship game against Columbia would get the second automatic bid. If that happens, if Columbia does not make the title game and does not make it, and obviously would not win it, then whoever wins the AMC would get the second automatic bid. So that's how that breaks down. Then you have your Appalachian. Your AAC, they get 2 auto bids. It's the regular season champ, which was Milligan. And so therefore, Milligan has punched their ticket via an auto bid. And then the second auto bid would go to the tournament champion. If Milligan does not make it to the title game, then whoever wins the AAC tournament would get the second auto bid. If Milligan makes it to the title game, then whoever makes it to that game against them would get the second auto bid. So that's how that breaks down in that conference. Then you have your California Pacific Conference, your CalPAC. They only get 1 team in. That is whoever wins the conference tournament, and obviously because they have less than 10 schools, that's how that breaks down. And right now, so again, whoever wins this conference tournament more than likely would be a 16 seed because of it being in a small conference and because of winning the conference tournament. So they're not going to get any teams in via an at-large bid in that conference. Then we get to the CCC, which is the Cascade Collegiate Athletic Conference. They get two auto bids. One, the regular season champion, which was Corbin. And then if Corbin wins that conference tournament, then whoever makes it to the title game against Corbin would get the second auto bid. If Corbin does not make it to the title game, then whoever wins that conference tournament would get the second auto bid. So that is how that, and this is just in terms of auto bids. And of course, this does not include at-large bids, which I talked about that in the first little bit of this video, how all that breaks down, how the criteria works, all that good stuff. And hopefully you understand that a lot better in terms of how teams get selected for an at-large bid. And then of course, after this, we'll talk about teams that could steal bids in terms of this year's tournament and how all that works. We're going to get to that in the next part. So again, make sure that you stay tuned for that. Then we get to the CCAC, which is the Chicagoland Collegiate Athletic Conference. They get two auto bids. They get the regular season, which is Olivet Nazarene, and now the second auto bid in that conference is that you get your regular season champ, which is Olivet Nazarene. Your second auto bid would be if Olivet does not make it to the title game, whoever wins the CCAC, if it's not Olivet Nazarene, whoever wins the conference tournament would get the second auto bid. Now, if Olivet Nazarene makes it to the league title game, then it would be the runner-up in that conference. And if Olivet makes it to the title game, it would be obviously the tournament runner-up. Well, that was just the regular season. Again, it's kind of hard to say, but it looks like more than likely that for the obviously regular season would be Olivet Nazarene. Then in terms of the tournament, if it was the regular season champion that wins that conference tournament, which again, let's just say Olivet would win, then that means the runner-up from the regular season would get the second auto bid, and that would be, I believe St. Francis out of Illinois would get the second auto bid should Olivet Nazarene also win that conference tournament. So again, we'll see how that plays out. Then in the Continental, they only get one automatic bid. That's the tournament champion. And then in the Crossroads, this is the league I follow the most, the league I attend the most games. Two auto bids here from the Crossroads. The regular season champion, which happened to be Marion. And then if Marion also wins the Crossroads League Tournament Championship, then whoever makes it to the title game against them would get the second auto bid. So let's say Marion beats Iwu tomorrow night, St. Francis beats Bethel, then St. Francis would get the second auto bid in the Crossroads. If Marion does not make it to the title game, then whoever wins the Crossroads League Tournament would get the second auto bid. Then we go to the Frontier. It's the regular season champ gets the first auto bid. That would be Dakota State. Their tournament champion would be the second auto bid if it was not Dakota State. If it was Dakota State that also won the tournament, then the runner-up in the Frontier tournament would be the second auto bid. Then we get to the GPAC. Two auto bids here. Regular season champion, which is obviously Dort. Then if Dort also makes it to the GPAC title game, whoever is the GPAC tournament runner-up would get the second auto bid. If it is not Dort that makes it to the title game, then whoever wins that conference tournament would get the second auto bid. In the GSAC, the Great Southwest, they only get one auto bid. Whoever wins that tournament would get the auto bid. The HBCU, they get two auto bids. The regular season champ, which the first one was Oakwood. Now, if Oakwood wins that conference tournament, then the tournament champion runner-up would get the second auto bid. If it is not Oakwood that makes it to the title game, whoever wins that conference tournament would get the second auto bid there. Then in the Heart, they get two auto bids here. The regular season champ, which in the Heart happened to be Mid-America Nazarene out of Kansas. The second auto bid here would go to the tournament runner-up if Mid-America Nazarene made it to their league title game. If they did not, then it would be whoever wins the tournament title would get the second auto bid. In the KCAC, the Kansas Collegiate Athletic Conference, 2 auto bids here. The regular season champion, which happened to be Evangel out of Missouri. Then if Evangel does not make it to the league title game, whoever wins the conference tournament would get the second auto bid. If Evangel makes it to the title game, then it would be the tournament champion runner-up. Whoever would make it to the title game against Evangel would get the second auto bid. Then we go to the Mid-South. They only get 1 automatic bid, whoever wins that conference tournament. Then in the Red River is a little more interesting. They still get 2 auto bids. The regular season champ, which was LSU Shreveport, and then whoever gets the second auto bid is the highest one listed in the respective arc, which we won't know that until the day of a selection show. So whoever is ranked second in the highest arc the day of the selection show in the Red River will get the second auto bid. So again, I know the Red River, it works a little bit differently than the other conferences. Then in the River States, 2 auto bids here. Regular season champ, which was Rio Grande. Then the second auto bid here comes from whoever has the highest, toughest strength of schedule. And again, this is another super weird conference where they get their second auto bid, but that's how that breaks down. And then in the Sooner, the SAC, or the SAC, you get 2 auto bids here. Regular season champ, which was Langston. Then you get, if Langston makes it to the league title game, then whoever makes it to that game against them would get the second auto bid. If Langston does not make it to the title game, whoever wins the Sooner Athletic Conference title would get the second auto bid there. Then in the Southern States, they get 2 auto bids, much like all the other conferences. The regular season champ in the Southern States, which happened to be Loyola. If Loyola does not make it to, at least I'm pretty sure it was Loyola. Let me double check on that real quick. At least I'm pretty sure it was Loyola in the Southern States. Yes, it was Loyola in the Southern States, so they get the first auto bid. Then the second auto bid there, if Loyola advances to the league title game, whoever makes it to that title game against Loyola would get the second auto bid. If Loyola does not make it to the title game, then it would be whoever wins that conference tournament would get the second auto bid. Then in the Sun, they only get 1 in, whoever wins that conference tournament, not whoever wins the regular season, because they have less than 10 schools. So when I said previously that Southeastern had already punched their ticket, I apologize for that. They would punch their ticket if they win that conference tournament, which again, they're the favorites to do so. And then finally in the WAC, Wolverine Hoosier Athletic Conference, 2 auto bids here. Whoever wins the regular season, which was Indiana Tech. Then if Tech does not make it to their title game, then whoever wins that tournament will get the second auto bid. And if Indiana Tech does make it to their league title game, whoever joins them in that game will get the second auto bid. And that's how all of that breaks down in terms of that. So stay tuned for part 2 in this video. So that's a breakdown of how teams get in via an at-large bid, and how all the teams get in, and how all the conferences get in teams via an auto bid. So I hope you found this super helpful, very informative. If you did, please like, comment, or subscribe. Any one of those options helps me out greatly. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. And in part 2, we are going to be looking at teams that could take bids away from bubble teams in terms of what we've seen so far in the tournaments. And I'll be talking more about how teams can do that. So again, make sure that you stay tuned. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you soon. God bless.